I got another hunch that Hitler, when he was diagnosed by this psychiatrist, I'm sure this has been fumbled with as far as reasoning for him going off on Jews. Because, I mean, how many other, after the, it wasn't it after Rome that the Germans were after Rome invaded, basically the Germans were mostly wiped out, the original. An influx of people from the outlying areas flooded in, and that's what became the Goth. Or, I mean, that's what the Goths were basically wiped out, and then the influx of surrounding countries invaded. So basically, they were all basically immigrants. And I don't know how many Jews there were in Germany at the time, but I don't know how many other nationalities were there too. You know, you never hear about that. It's everything. Everything is what is the word? Focused on one thing. You know, the people that are trying to prove something, they only prove that one thing. They don't ever head off into any other finger of fact in the case. It's always you know, it's like they're self-aggrandized, not self-aggrandized. What is the word? You're like what do they call it when you're infatuated with yourself? Anyway, and I think that's what they are. I think that, you know, anyway, so if Hitler wasn't gibberish, I don't know, I'm thinking on the move. Hitler, if he was diagnosed, maybe the guy come up and said, whoever diagnosed him or gave him whatever thing they said this, that, and the other, and maybe it was above his head of how they diagnosed him, and he was like, "Oh, you're calling me crazy then? Well, I'll show you crazy." And that, you know, maybe that's not the exact wording. Of course, it wouldn't be, because he was Austrian and he would have spoke, you know, German or whatever. But then he would have said, "Oh, you're calling me crazy. You're a doctor of psychiatry, and all they do is call people crazy, and you're just calling me crazy in some other form." And then maybe he was surprised that he got let out, and he was figuring he was diagnosed as crazy and by a Jew, and the Jew let him out of prison, but he actually didn't. He was just released, and he probably wasn't. You know, he was just kind of, well, maybe he diagnosed him as stupid. Only it was so written so, what is it? Flowery, not flower. Eloquently. He couldn't handle the eloquence of the diagnosis. He didn't know what it meant, so he just figured he was being called crazy, real flowery. And then when he got released, he figured, well, he let me out, called me crazy, so I'm going to show him crazy. And then maybe that's what happened to him. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was just who knows what he was before. You know, people. If you get it's like if you're you move to an area and you do something and somebody notices. Maybe that's their only thing that they know about you, because, you know, there's always people trying to. If there's somebody new to the area, they're going to try to discount them in some way. They won't say they're discounting them, but, you know, you'll do something, and then you'll come back, and all they'll remember is the stupid stuff you did or whatever. It's not that you might have done 100 things good and one thing stupid just because that person was always thinking you're stupid, or so, you know, or there's always something different about them. So so maybe that's what he was. He was like, he was so off into, you know, anyway, I'm just figuring, you know, he was diagnosed with something, and then that's what caused him to go crazy, because he figured he was diagnosed with crazy, and so he went out and I mean, did it, in his speech, I don't know what he said in any of his speeches because they're all in German. I mean, they give you a German class when you go over to Germany, but I mean, you gotta talk that stuff to somebody, and I wasn't in the mood to talking to guys. It's like learning language, because when you learn a language, it's usually you're reading poems when you're a little child. You're hearing nursery rhymes. You're learning a new language, whatever language it is you were supposed to learn. When you're a child, whatever country you grow up in, you learn it through rhymes and poems and songs. And you don't learn it in conversation one to another person. That's after you've achieved a conversation, then you're introduced. You don't. I think that's what makes it hard, is people anyway. So that's where I'm at with this little diagnosis of why Hitler. Everybody's wondering why Hitler went, did all the stuff that he did. Why was he such a madman? And maybe he was just maybe he just self-diagnosed. Maybe he couldn't have been diagnosed as crazy, because I don't think they would have let him out. They would have put him in some place else. So maybe he just went off on himself, thinking, well, they just called me crazy, and then he was like, he was in charge of people, and they were saying, yeah, you're us. And so he'd say, oh yeah, well, they're calling us all crazy, because he's still self-diagnosed, and they're saying the German people are crazy. And I don't know what his speeches said, but if it was interpreted, if I trusted an interpreter, maybe it's a biased interpreter trying to prove their bias, or whatever it is, prove their agenda. So that's why the reason I don't trust interpreters. So anyway, this is part 2 of whatever about I did a Hitler video.